Michelle again, and today we're going to talk a little bit about dating in archaeology and the abbreviations that we use for dates in archaeological literature. And I had an email asking if we could talk about this. So if you guys have any questions or thoughts about things we should cover, feel free to send me an email or comment on this video, or find us on Facebook and put a note there. And we can talk about some things on videos that I haven't thought of. That would be great. So dating, the dates that we use, or the dating abbreviations that we use most commonly in the United States that we're familiar with, are something we use in archaeology too, and those are AD and BC. And AD is Anno Domini, and that's Latin, so I might pronounce it wrong, and that means in the year of the Lord. And then BC is before Christ. And so those are based around the year 0, and so AD is post-0, so we're in 2020 AD right now, and then BC is prior to 0. So any date you could have 1000 BC, that kind of thing. And then you'll also start to see more recently CE and BCE, and those stand for Common Era and Before Common Era. And those are still based around that same 0. So it's not actually changing the year, it's just changing the nomenclature around it. And from what I understand, it's really just to keep it all a little more secular so that we're not favoring a particular religion. I mean, AD and BC are coming from the Gregorian calendar, and that's wrapped up with the Catholic Church. So CE just allows it to be more secular, without bringing any religion into our dating that has nothing to do with that. But it doesn't change the year. So we would still be in 2020 CE. And if you're talking about before the year 0, you're in BCE. So you could be 1000 BCE. And those dates align one for one, AD to CE. But then when we start to talk about archaeological literature specifically, we talk a lot about radiocarbon dates. And radiocarbon dates often are presented as BP, which is before present. And here's where things get tricky, because present is 1950. Why? Because that's when radiocarbon dating really became a thing that we were using. It's kind of invented at that point. And so we base all of our dates before present, but present doesn't change. If present was changing, then our dates would have to change every year. And we could never keep up. So 1950 is the established present, and that's what we use. So when you see a date before present, that means you're going to have to do some subtraction to figure out what AD or CE year that would be. But you'll also see calibrated years, BP, sometimes abbreviated as CALBP. And so that means the calibrated number of years before the present. And so we talked a little bit about this before, but so radiocarbon dates are based on measuring the ratios of different carbon isotopes. And some carbon isotopes break down through time and some stay steady. But because that happens, we can measure how long that particular sample has been around. And we do that by measuring those isotope ratios. And then we have to take those ratios and set them against a calibration curve so that we can figure out the actual calendar year in which those ratios come from. And so I've got just a really simple one here that I took off of Wikipedia, and you can see it. We've got the radiocarbon age on this side, and then the calendar age down here. And if it was a 1-for-1 curve, it would be that straight line. But it's not, because there's different ratios of carbon isotopes in the atmosphere and around the Earth at different times. That's based on a whole bunch of different things. But plants uptake that carbon, and of course, they're uptaking those different ratios. And so you start with different ratios, then the breakdown will be slightly different. And so you have to figure all of that in when you're trying to figure out how much of those isotopes have broken down and how much there were to start with. And so this calibration curve is just a very kind of simple view of how you do that. So you say you had 10,000 measured as your radiocarbon age, but then actually you get a little bit more than 10,000 as your actual calendar date. And you can zoom in on this graph, not on Wikipedia, but in real life, these graphs, you can zoom in really closely based on the date range you're looking at and the hemisphere of the Earth that you're in. And the calibration dates are based on a lot of other ways of measuring dates. There's tree ring dating is a big one that helps with this calibration curve, because you can know what calendar year you're in from the tree ring and then measure the carbon isotope ratio from that same ring and get this kind of data. But there are also a lot of other dating methods that you can use to align these two, these ratios of carbon versus actual calendar years. And so when you measure that, the radiocarbon, then you put it against these curves, and then you get the calibrated years before present. And that's again before 1950. And then from that, you can subtract out, so you can get the actual date in Common Era or AD or BCE or BC numbers. And so that's kind of the basic ones that we see. I don't know if there are any other that you'll really run across. And like I said, in archaeology, BP is really kind of a big one, or calibrated BP. And that's, you want to make sure you know if it's calibrated or not, because if it's not calibrated, it's a much shakier number. But when someone has calibrated it, and there are a couple of different websites, and usually whatever lab you send your information to will have calibrated it as well, so that you have a really good idea of what your date is. But I hope that was helpful. I hope it was interesting. And like I said at the beginning, if you have any other questions or things you'd like me to talk about, or find someone who knows about it to talk about, let me know. We'd love to keep making these videos. And I will talk to you later. Bye.